My name is Rabbi Braun. I understand that B'nai B'rith has launched a program of Jews saving Jews during the Holocaust, and I'd like to introduce my mother, who passed away recently, Eli Braun, who particularly, when she was 16 to 18 years old, from 1940 to 1942 in southern France, was instrumental in saving hundreds, if perhaps thousands of Jews under the guidance of her father, Emanuel Schlesinger. My sister put together a booklet about her. But very briefly, I'll share just 2 episodes that will shed a little bit of light. My grandfather, probably the only Jew who was successful in getting permission by the Nazi-run Vichy government to become a free man, because he had kept his Hungarian passport and he was listed as an inventor, and he walked into the Vichy, basically Gestapo office, and got permits. And they found a room in a farmhouse in a tiny little village called Castelmiran, and that became sort of the Hatzalah center, where people who were in trouble and their lives were endangered would come to speak to the Schlesingers. And I'll share just 2 little stories. One, on a Shabbat morning, there was a Rabbi Dovidel Halberstam, who was in the next village, Castel Ferru, with his family, came very agitated with his 17-year-old son, Moshe. The police had come and said that he had to register on Sunday, Moshe, in the internment camp, which meant certain death. Everyone was deported to Auschwitz. My grandfather instructed my mother, who was 16, 17, get on your bike. Don't go through the village, because all the villagers know that you won't ride your bike on Shabbat. Go through the fields and the forests to a semi-distant town called St. Nicholas de la Grave. And there is a Dr. Carrère. And Dr. Carrère will give you a letter that he examined Moshe Halberstam. He's deathly ill and cannot go to the internment camp. Once he gives you that letter, go to the police station. And my mother knew every gendarme on a first-name basis because of her activities. Go to the police station and have them stamp that letter. And then 7 hours later, going through that circuitous route, she returned, and they were still waiting in front of their farmhouse. And because of that letter, this Moshe did not have to go to the internment camp. And a few months later, the Halberstam family was able to come to the United States, and this Moshe Halberstam became the head of a magnificent family in Brooklyn. More importantly, in 1942, the Vichy government announced that all Jews have to be sent to the internment camps. There were several hundred families, Jewish families, being hidden in the villages near Castelmiran. The local priest in the large church in Castelmiran is where all the villagers would come every Sunday. And that's one particular Sunday, the priest got up and he said, all of these Christian families were in a dilemma, because their conscience told them they have to protect the Jews, but the law was now that they had to give them up. And the priest got up in a fiery anti-Semitic speech, said, you think you're getting a mitzvah? You're going to burn in hell. They killed our God. And things became terrible. My grandfather, Menachem Schlesinger, sequestered himself for 2 days and studied the New Testament. Went with my mother, who spoke a perfect French, which is another story, but she spoke a magnificent French. And he went with her to the priest. And my grandfather proceeded to use the New Testament as evidence for him to change his opinion. And my mother made the presentation. She said the priest turned first pink, then red, then purple, started shaking. She thought he would drop dead, but instead he chased them out of his office. My grandfather then said he heard that the Archbishop of Toulouse, which was 40 miles away, in addition to a 40-mile train ride, in addition to a 4-hour walk, and if they were to be caught, it meant death, deportation. And he told my mother, we are going to the Archbishop of Toulouse. So the next day, they did the 4-hour walk, the 40-mile train, and at the end of the day, they got into the Archbishop of Toulouse. And my grandfather told my mother what to say, and she gave a half-hour impassioned plea on behalf of the Jews. And the Archbishop was very agitated, and he took a 10-minute walk, pacing back and forth, and he came back and he said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a letter encouraging all of the members of my diocese to help the Jews. And I'm going to see to it that all of the priests in my diocese are going to read it this coming Sunday. In fact, the priest in your village will be embarrassed because last Sunday he told everyone what a sin it was, and now he's going to be forced to read a retraction with my letter. And I want you to be in the church. And things got much, much better as a result. About 15 years ago, my mother lived in Jerusalem, passed away 5 weeks ago. She heard that there was going to be a documentary showing the state of the Jews in France during the Holocaust. She said, I was there. And when she watched this documentary, she went into shock. Because what she discovered was that letter of the Archbishop of Toulouse went viral. Not only was it read in 400 churches, but the partisans, the resistants, took that letter and made it was a manifesto. They made hundreds of thousands of copies that were distributed all over France. And within a few weeks, the general population of France that had been pro-Vichy became anti-Vichy. And who knows how many hundreds, if not thousands, of Jews were saved. When I went with my mother back to France in when she was 88, 10 years ago, and we had to spend the night in Toulouse, the chief rabbi of Toulouse, when I shared this story with him, said to me, Rabbi Braun, everybody knows what the Archbishop of Toulouse did for the Jews of France, but no one knows that your mother got him to write that letter, and she is here now. If today wasn't Armistice Day, illegal, I would have had all the Jewish children in the city of Toulouse hear your mother present. But I want you to come to shul, the old shul in Toulouse, tomorrow morning for Shacharit. And I did. And the rabbi was there. And I saw that if the eastern wall has the Aron HaKodesh, the Ark, the wall to the right immediately was a huge white marble plaque thanking in French the Archbishop of Toulouse. And when the prayers were over, the rabbi asked everybody to stay for 2 minutes and said, we all know what the Archbishop of Toulouse did for the country of France, for the Jews, during the Holocaust. We all know about the famous letter that he wrote, but what you don't know is that the girl who got him to write that letter is here with us, and his son prayed with us, and here he is. And all of a sudden, the entire population of the shul burst into commotion, and I said, I didn't do anything. And there is more and more and more, but this is what I've shared with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Reb. Thank you.
10 years ago, when we went back to Castelmiran, my mother, we went to Vienna because it ended up that one of the most famous music professors of musicology at the University of Paris was saved by my mother. And that sort of gave her some publicity. And therefore, in a French palace in Vienna, an award was given to my mother for her rescue efforts during the war. And she accepted it on behalf of her father. When we went to this little village, Castelmiran, it was Armistice Day, and town hall was closed, but there was a big poster when Eli Schlesinger arrives, call this number, and all the old timers who remembered her from 70 years before came. And one of them insisted we come to his house. And when we arrive, my mother says, this is Madame Soberville's house. She would always lend me her bike because my bike was an old rickety bike, and when I had to go on these longer missions, my bike wasn't seaworthy. And what are you doing in her house? So this man, Gilbert, said, I worked for her. She had no children. When she passed away, she gave me the house. And then he said, one moment. And he went into the barn, now garage, comes out with a green bike, and my mother says, that was my bike. I rode thousands of kilometers on that bike 70 years ago. And we have a picture of my mother with that bike. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.